At my great-grandson's baptism, my daughter-in-law called me the shrew of the family. I handed her a letter that could ruin her honor. The small church was filled with the scent of lilies and the soft murmur of conversation as I smoothed down my best navy dress, the one I'd saved for special occasions like this. My hands trembled slightly as I adjusted the small gold cross pendant around my neck, a gift from my late husband, Robert. At 72, I wasn't used to such gatherings anymore. My son Michael rarely invited me to family events, always with some excuse about keeping things small or not wanting to tire me out. I knew the real reason, though. Caroline, my daughter-in-law of 15 years, had made it her mission to erase me from their lives. When the invitation to little Thomas's baptism arrived in my mailbox 3 weeks ago, I had stared at it in disbelief. My great-grandson was already 3 months old, and this was the first time I would see him. I'd spent days preparing, selecting the perfect gift, a hand-knitted blanket that had taken me months to make, with his name delicately embroidered. In the corner. "Mother, you made it," Michael said as I entered, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. He gave me a stiff hug, the kind reserved for distant acquaintances rather than your only parent. "I wouldn't miss it for the world," I replied, clutching my handbag a little tighter. Inside was the letter, the one I'd written and rewritten, a dozen times debating whether I should ever give it to Caroline. The christening itself was beautiful. Standing at the back of the church, I watched as the priest blessed my great-grandson, tears welling in my eyes. I hadn't been allowed to stand with the family at the font. "Space is limited," Caroline had explained curtly when I arrived. So, I observed from a distance like a stranger. Afterward, during the small reception in the church hall, I finally got my chance to approach the baby. He was perfect. Those same Gallagher eyes that ran in our family, the same dimple in his left cheek that Michael had as an infant. "May I hold him?" I asked my granddaughter-in-law Jessica, who smiled kindly and started to hand him to me. "I don't think that's a good idea," Caroline interrupted, appearing suddenly beside us. "He's just settled down." Jessica looked uncomfortable, but didn't protest as Caroline took the baby from her arms. "I just wanted to hold him for a moment," I said softly, "and to give him this." I offered the carefully wrapped blanket. Caroline looked at it with disdain. "We already have plenty of blankets, Eleanor." She didn't even take it from my hands. I swallowed hard, fighting back tears. "I made it myself. It has his name on it." I sighed dramatically, as if I was being difficult. "Fine, just put it with the other gifts." I placed the blanket on the table, noticing how it was immediately pushed aside by Caroline's sister to make room for larger, store-bought presents. As I turned back, I overheard Caroline speaking to her group of friends, her voice deliberately, loud enough for me to hear. "That's Michael's mother," she said with a small laugh. "The shrew of the family, always criticizing, always interfering. We try to include her, but honestly, it's exhausting." The room seemed to fall silent, though I'm sure that was just in my head. Heat rushed to my face as several people glanced my way with pitying looks. My heart pounded in my chest so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. Michael stood, nearby, looking uncomfortable but saying nothing to defend me. My own son, letting his wife speak about me that way. In that moment, something inside me, something that had been bending and bending for years, finally snapped. With surprising steadiness, I walked over to Caroline, who raised an eyebrow at my approach. Without a word, I reached into my handbag and pulled out the sealed envelope. "I'd like you to read this," I said quietly, placing it in her free hand. "When you're alone." Caroline looked confused, then slightly alarmed. "What is this?" I met her, eyes directly. "Something I should have given you a long time ago." As I turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of genuine fear in her eyes. She knew exactly what might be in that envelope. The photos I'd accidentally discovered last Christmas, the ones that would destroy the perfect image she'd constructed for her family and friends. I walked out of the church with my head held high, even as tears threatened to spill. Behind me, I could hear Caroline making excuses, trying to laugh it off, but the slight tremor in her voice told me everything. For 15 years, I had tried to be the perfect mother-in-law, supportive, not interfering, loving from a distance when that was all I was permitted. For 15 years, I had watched as my son was slowly pulled away from me, as my grandchildren were taught that Grandma Eleanor is too busy, or Grandma Eleanor is too critical. The truth in that letter could change everything, or it could destroy the fragile threads that still connected me to my family. As I stepped into the bright sunshine outside the church, I wasn't sure whether I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life or finally stood up for myself after years of silent suffering. The drive back to my small apartment felt endless. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white, and I kept replaying Caroline's voice in my head. The shrew of the family. After all these years, that's all I was to her. A nuisance, an inconvenience to be tolerated, as I pulled into my parking space, exhaustion washed over me. Not just from the day, but from 15 years of trying to maintain a relationship with a son who had allowed himself to be pulled away from me, piece by piece. Inside, I slipped off my shoes and sank into my worn armchair, the one Robert and I had bought together when we were first married. The apartment was quiet, too quiet, with just the ticking of the grandfather clock Robert had restored filling the silence. "What would you have done, Robert?" I whispered to the empty room. My mind drifted back to when Michael was born. Robert and I had been married just 2 years, barely getting by on his mechanic's salary and my part-time job at the library. We'd not been so happy, though, our tiny apartment above Mrs. Hargrove's garage filled with more love than many mansions. Then came the accident. Robert, always willing to help a friend, had gone to assist with a broken-down car on the highway. The drunk driver had come out of nowhere. Just like that, at 26, I was a widow with a 3-year-old son. I reached for the photo album on the side table, my fingers tracing the faded cover. Inside were the memories Caroline would never acknowledge. Me working 2 jobs to keep us afloat. Michael's first day of school. His baseball games where I cheered from the sidelines after rushing from my evening shift. When the insurance money ran out, I'd taken night classes to get my teaching degree, leaving Michael with my mother for those few hours, working days and studying nights. There were no vacations, no luxuries, but there was always love. Always. "He was such a kind boy," I murmured, looking at a photo of 12-year-old Michael, gap-toothed and grinning, proudly holding up a science fair ribbon. What happened to that boy? What happened was Caroline. They'd met at college when Michael was studying engineering on the scholarship I'd helped him earn. She was from a wealthy family with expectations about what life should look like. Her father had helped Michael get his first job at a prestigious firm. Her mother had planned their wedding, barely consulting me. I tried. God knows I tried. I brought homemade dishes to their dinner parties, only to overhear Caroline telling her friends they were quaint, but not up to her standards. I offered to babysit when the grandchildren came, only to be told they preferred professional childcare. Slowly, the invitations to family events became fewer. My suggestions were dismissed as outdated. My calls went unanswered for days. When I did see Michael, it was always brief, always with Caroline hovering nearby. I turned the page of the album to a more recent photo. Caroline at a charity gala, her arm around a man who wasn't my son. I'd found it on Michael's laptop last Christmas when he'd asked me to help him download some photos of the children. I'd clicked on the wrong folder, and there they were. Dozens of photos of Caroline with this other man, looking far too intimate for a casual friendship. I hadn't told Michael. How could I? He'd built his entire life around her, giving up his dream of teaching engineering to take the corporate position her father had arranged. Would he even believe me over her? Instead, I'd printed one photo and written a letter explaining when and how I'd found it, expressing my concern not as an accusation but as a mother who couldn't bear to see her son betrayed. That letter had sat in my drawer for 6 months, until today. My phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. Michael's name flashed on the screen. My heart jumped. Had Caroline already shown him the letter? "Hello?" I answered, my voice shakier than I intended. "Mom." His tone was cold. "What did you give to Caroline?" I closed my eyes. Something she needed to see. "She's upset, Mom. She won't even tell me what was in the envelope." So she hadn't shown him yet. Interesting. "I think that's something you should discuss with your wife, Michael." He sighed, that impatient sound I'd grown too familiar with. "Why can't you just let things be? Today was supposed to be about Thomas, not another opportunity for you to create drama." The injustice of his words hit me like a physical blow. Drama? Is that what you call it when I'm publicly humiliated by your wife? When I'm called a shrew in front of the entire family? Silence. Then, "She was just joking, Mom. You're too sensitive." I thought of all the years I'd swallowed my hurt, made excuses for his absence, pretended not to notice how I was being pushed aside. "No, Michael. I'm not too sensitive. I'm just finally standing up for myself." What's that supposed to mean? What was in that letter? For a moment, I considered telling him everything. How Caroline had been systematically isolating him from me. How I'd found those photos. How I'd watched helplessly as the sweet boy I raised disappeared into someone who could stand by while his mother was insulted. Instead, I simply said, "Ask Caroline." After we hung up, I sat in the growing darkness of my apartment, wondering if I'd just destroyed whatever relationship I still had with my son. But for the first time in years, beneath the sadness and uncertainty, I felt something else. Relief. The truth, however painful, was finally taking its first steps into the light. 3 days passed without a word from Michael or Caroline. My phone remained silent, like a stone sitting on my coffee table, both dreaded and desperately wanted. Every time I walked past it, I would check for missed calls or texts, though I knew the ringtone would have alerted me. I tried to keep busy. I watered my small collection of houseplants, meticulously dusting each leaf. I reorganized my bookshelf alphabetically, then by genre, then back to alphabetical. I even started a new knitting project, a small cardigan for Thomas that he would probably never wear. On the 4th morning, I woke up with a strange sense of calm. Whatever happened now was beyond my control. I had spent 15 years being the perfect doormat, and where had that gotten me? I was still the family shrew, still kept at arm's length, still an afterthought. I made myself a proper breakfast for the first time in days, eggs, toast, and a cup of strong tea. As I was washing the dishes, the phone rang. My heart leaped into my throat, but the caller ID showed a name I hadn't expected. Martha Lewis. Martha and I had been close friends when our children were young, bonding over PTA meetings and soccer games. Like so many friendships, ours had drifted. Over the years, especially after she moved to Arizona to be near her daughter. We exchanged Christmas cards and the occasional phone call, but that was about it. "Eleanor? Is that you?" Her voice sounded just the same, warm and slightly husky from years of smoking that she'd given up a decade ago. "Martha, what a surprise." I dried my hands on a dish towel, cradling the phone against my shoulder. "I've been thinking about you lately," she said. "Something told me to pick up the phone today." "How are you?" The simple question nearly undid me. How long had it been since someone had genuinely asked how I was doing? Not the polite, passing, "How are you?" that expected only "fine" as an answer, but a real inquiry from someone who cared. Before, I knew it. The whole story came pouring out. The years of subtle exclusion, Caroline's public humiliation, the letter with the photo, and the silence that had followed. Martha listened without interruption, occasionally making small sounds of sympathy. When I finally ran out of words, she sighed deeply. "Oh, Eleanor, I'm so sorry." Then, after a pause, "But I'm also a little proud of you." Proud? The word caught me off guard. Yes, proud. For finally standing up for yourself. You've spent your whole life taking care of others. First Robert, then Michael, and now you're still trying to be there for your grandchildren and great-grandson. When was the last time you did something for yourself? I honestly couldn't remember. Listen, Martha continued. I'm in town for the next 2 weeks staying with my sister. There's a group that meets at the community center on Wednesdays. Mostly women our age, some widowed, some divorced, some just looking for connection. Why don't you come with me tomorrow? My first instinct was to refuse. What if Michael called while I was out? What if Caroline decided to talk? But then I realized I could bring my cell phone. And more importantly, why was I still arranging my life around people who clearly weren't arranging theirs around me? I'd like that, I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. After hanging up with Martha, I felt lighter somehow. I picked up a framed photo of Michael and me from his high school graduation, his arm around my shoulders, both of us beaming with pride and hope for the future. That mother and son had been a team. Somewhere along the way, I'd forgotten that I wasn't just Michael's mother or Caroline's mother-in-law or Thomas's great-grandmother. I was still Eleanor Gallagher, a woman in my own right. That afternoon, I decided to walk to the small park 2 blocks from my apartment. It was a mild spring day, the kind that hints at summer's approach. Sitting on a bench, I watched children play, mothers chatting nearby, elderly couples strolling hand in hand. My phone rang again. This time, it was my granddaughter, Lisa, Michael and Caroline's oldest. "Grandma?" Her voice sounded hesitant, almost secretive. "Lisa, sweetheart, how are you?" I tried to keep my voice neutral, not wanting to put her in an awkward position. "I'm okay." She paused. "Mom and Dad are fighting. It's about you, isn't it? About what happened at the baptism." I closed my eyes, regretting that my actions had affected the grandchildren. "It's complicated, honey. Mom won't tell Dad what was in the letter. She's been crying a lot, and he's really angry." She lowered her voice further. "What was in it, Grandma?" I took a deep breath. "That's something for your parents to discuss, Lisa. I'm sorry you're caught in the middle of this." She was quiet for a moment. "Are you okay, Grandma? Mom says some pretty mean things about you sometimes, but I've always thought she was wrong. You're not what she says you are." Tears welled in my eyes. "Thank you, sweetheart. That means more to me than you know." "I miss you," she said simply. "We don't visit you enough." "I miss you too. Maybe when things settle down, you could come over. I could teach you how to make those chocolate chip cookies you used to love." "I'd like that," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "I have to go now. Mom's coming." After we hung up, I sat in the park for a long time, watching the sun begin its descent. Whatever storm was brewing in Michael and Caroline's house, I couldn't control it. But Lisa's call had given me something precious. The knowledge that I hadn't been entirely erased from my grandchildren's hearts. As I walked home, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from Martha. "Looking forward to tomorrow. Pick you up at 1 mile. Wear something colorful." For the first time in days, I smiled. Tomorrow would bring what it would bring, but it would also bring something new, something just for me. And that, in itself, felt like a small victory. Martha's car pulled up precisely at 1 o'clock. I had taken her advice and worn a turquoise blouse that Robert had always said brought out the color of my eyes. It had been hanging in my closet, barely touched for years. "You look lovely," Martha said as I settled into the passenger seat. That color suits you. The community center was a 15-minute drive away, in a part of town I rarely visited. As we walked in, I felt a flutter of anxiety in my stomach. What if I didn't fit in? What if these women already had their established friendships and I was just an intruder? Martha seemed to sense my hesitation. She squeezed my arm gently. They're good people, Eleanor. Just be yourself. The room was set up with chairs in a loose circle. About a dozen women were already there, some my age, some older, a few younger. They looked up as we entered, and several called out greetings to Martha. Everyone, this is my dear friend Eleanor, Martha announced, guiding me forward. Tall woman with silver hair tied back in a neat bun approached us. Welcome, Eleanor. I'm Grace, the informal leader of this little group. We're just women supporting women here. She smiled warmly. No pressure to share anything you don't want to. The meeting began with casual conversation, then moved into a more structured discussion about finding purpose in later life. I listened, fascinated by these women's stories. A retired teacher who now volunteered teaching English to immigrants. A widow who had started painting at 70 and recently had her first gallery showing. A former housewife who had gone back to college at 65. When the conversation turned to family relationships, I felt a knot form in my throat. One woman described her strained relationship with her daughter-in-law, and heads nodded in understanding around the room. Would you like to share anything, Eleanor? Grace asked gently. I hesitated, then found myself talking about Michael, about Caroline, about the baptism. I didn't mention the letter or the photo, just the years of being sidelined and the final public humiliation. I've spent so long trying to be what they wanted, I concluded, that I'm not sure I know who I am anymore. The room was quiet for a moment. Then a woman named Dorothy, who must have been close to 80, leaned forward in her chair. Honey, that's the most important journey you've got left, finding yourself again. Her eyes twinkled behind thick glasses. And it's the most exciting one, too. After the meeting, several women invited Martha and me to join them for coffee. Sitting in the small cafe across from the community center, I felt a warmth spreading through me that had nothing to do with the hot drink in my hands. These women asked questions and actually listened to the answers. They laughed at my few tentative jokes. They treated me like I mattered. As Martha drove me home, I realized I'd gone 3 hours without checking my phone or worrying about what might be happening with Michael and Caroline. Thank you, I said simply. Martha smiled. Same time next week? I nodded, already looking forward to it. When I entered my apartment, the light on my answering machine was blinking. I pressed play, bracing myself. Mom, it's Michael. We need to talk. Call me back, please. His voice sounded tired, strained, but not angry. I checked the time, 3:30 p.m. Taking a deep breath, I dialed his number. He answered on the second ring. Mom. Michael. How are you? A pause. I've been better. He cleared his throat. Can I come over? Alone? I need to talk to you face to face. Of course, I said, my heart racing. When? I can be there in half an hour. After hanging up, I moved around the apartment in a flurry of nervous energy. I straightened the already neat cushions on the sofa, wiped down the spotless coffee table, and put on a pot of coffee. Michael had always preferred coffee to tea. Exactly 30 minutes later, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, the sight of my son nearly broke my heart. He looked exhausted, with dark circles under his eyes and a slump to his shoulders I'd never seen before. Come in, I said softly, stepping aside. He walked in, glancing around as if seeing the place for the first time, though he'd visited, briefly, always briefly, a few times a year. He sank onto the sofa while I poured coffee, into 2 mugs, his with cream, no sugar, just as he'd always liked it. So, he said after taking a sip, the letter. I sat across from him, keeping my voice steady. Yes. Caroline finally showed it to me last night. He set the mug down carefully. She admitted it was her in the photo, but she claims it was nothing. Just a friend she was comforting during a difficult time. I kept my expression neutral. I see. Is that really all you have to say? A flash of the old Michael, quick to frustration. What would you like me to say, Michael? I found the photo by accident. I gave it to Caroline because I thought she should know that I knew. What she tells you about it is between you and her. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my chest ache. I checked her phone this morning while she was in the shower. His voice dropped. There were texts, hundreds of them. This has been going on for over a year. I reached across and took his hand. For once, he didn't pull away. I feel like such a fool, he whispered. And the worst part is, the things she's been saying about you all these years. I believed her. I let her push you away because she convinced me you were controlling, judgmental. He looked up, his eyes wet. I'm so sorry, Mom. Oh, Michael. My own eyes filled with tears. We both made mistakes. I should have been more direct years ago instead of just withdrawing. Lisa told me she called you. He gave a weak smile. She said you were nothing like what Caroline described. She said you were kind and didn't even badmouth Caroline when you had the chance. We talked for over 2 hours. Really talked, in a way we hadn't since before he met Caroline. He told me about the problems in his marriage that he'd been hiding, about his regrets regarding his career path, about his growing realization that he'd been controlled as much as I had been excluded. What will you do now? I asked finally. He shook his head. I don't know. We have the kids to think about, but things can't go on as they have been. He looked at me intently. Whatever happens, I want you back in our lives. My life, the kids' lives. As he stood to leave, he embraced me tightly, the way he used to when he was younger. I've missed you, Mom, he whispered, even when I didn't realize it. After he left, I sat quietly, processing everything. The letter had done what years of patience and silence couldn't. It had cracked open the carefully constructed facade of Michael and Caroline's marriage. I took no joy in their pain, but as I looked at the photo of Michael and me at his graduation, I felt a glimmer of hope that perhaps, just perhaps, we might find our way back to being a team again. The following Saturday, I received an unexpected text from Lisa. Can I come over today, Grandma? Around 2? My heart leaped with joy. Of course, sweetheart. I'll have those cookies ready. I spent the morning cleaning, though the apartment was already spotless, and baking chocolate chip cookies. The way Lisa had always loved them, slightly underdone in the center, crisp around the edges. The familiar routine of measuring, mixing, and baking brought back memories of afternoons with Lisa and her younger brother James when they were small, before Caroline had deemed my influence outdated. At precisely 2 o'clock, the doorbell rang. When I opened it, I was surprised to find not just Lisa, but James as well. At 17, he was almost a man now, tall and lanky like Michael had been at that age. James. What a wonderful surprise. I hugged them both, noticing how James hesitated slightly before returning the embrace. Dad said we could come, Lisa explained as they settled onto the sofa. Mom doesn't know. I frowned slightly. I don't want to cause more problems. James shrugged, reaching for a cookie. There are already problems, Grandma. Lots of them. The frankness in his voice startled me. I'd always thought of James as the quiet one, the peacekeeper. Dad moved out 3 days ago, Lisa said bluntly. He's staying at Uncle Paul's. I sat down heavily. Oh, I didn't know. Mom blames you, James added, his eyes meeting mine directly. She says you interfered and ruined everything. I felt a stab of guilt, quickly followed by indignation. I didn't ruin anything. I just revealed what was already there. Lisa nodded. That's what Dad said too. She hesitated, then asked the question I'd been dreading. What was in that letter, Grandma? The one you gave Mom at the baptism? I looked at my grandchildren, these young people caught in the middle of adult problems. They deserved some version of the truth, but how much? It contained a photo I found accidentally last Christmas, I said carefully. Your mother with another man. They looked very close. James's expression darkened. I knew it. I saw texts on her phone once from someone named Mark. She said he was just a colleague. She's been seeing him for over a year, Lisa added quietly. Dad found out everything. I reached out and took their hands. I'm so sorry you're going through this. I never wanted to hurt anyone, especially not you two. We know. Lisa squeezed my hand. But Mom's been hurting people for years, especially you. James nodded in agreement. She always made comments about you when you weren't around. Dad would sometimes defend you, but not very strongly. It made us uncomfortable. A lump formed in my throat. All these years, I'd thought the grandchildren were being turned against me, but they had seen through Caroline's manipulations. Why did you wait so long to say something about the photo? Lisa asked. I sighed, trying to find the right words. I was afraid of losing what little connection I still had with all of you. And I thought, maybe I was wrong. Maybe there was an innocent explanation. There wasn't, James said flatly. We spent the afternoon talking, really talking, about the past 15 years. The grandchildren filled in gaps from their perspective, telling me about times Caroline had intercepted my gifts, forgotten to pass on my messages, or made excuses for why visits to Grandma couldn't happen. She told us you were too busy, Lisa said, indignation coloring her voice, or that you didn't like having kids around because of the mess. I shook my head, fighting back tears. I was never too busy for you. Never. As evening approached, Michael called to check on them. After Lisa assured him they were fine, she handed the phone to me. Hi, Mom, he said, his voice weary but warm. Are they behaving? They're wonderful, I replied. Michael, I hope you know I never intended— I know, he interrupted gently. The truth was going to come out eventually. Better from someone who loves me than from a stranger. After the call, I made a simple dinner, and we ate together at my small kitchen table. It felt surreal, having my grandchildren there after so many years of brief, supervised visits. We should do this more often, James said, surprising me. Even when whatever's going to happen with Mom and Dad happens. I'd like that very much, I replied, my voice thick with emotion. When it was time for them to leave, they both hugged me tightly. Lisa lingered a moment longer. Dad told us something. Else? She said quietly. About all you did for him after Grandpa died. Working 2 jobs, putting him through college. She looked around my modest apartment. You could have had a bigger place, a better life, if you hadn't spent everything on him. I cupped her cheek gently. I have exactly the life I chose, Lisa. Being your father's mother has been my greatest joy. After they left, I sat alone in my suddenly quiet apartment, reflecting on the day's revelations. The damage Caroline had done went deeper than I'd imagined, but so did the resilience of family bonds. My grandchildren had seen the truth despite her efforts to paint me as the villain. The next morning, my phone rang early. It was Michael. Mom? Can I come over? There's something important I need to show you. An hour later, Michael arrived carrying a large cardboard box. He set it on my coffee table and opened it carefully. I found these in Caroline's closet, he said, pulling out a stack of cards and letters. They're from you. I picked up one, a birthday card I'd sent to Lisa 3 years ago. Inside was a note about the gift certificate that had accompanied it, a certificate Lisa had apparently never received. "There are dozens of them," Michael said quietly. "Birthday cards, Christmas gifts, notes about visits you wanted to arrange." He met my eyes, his own filled with shame. "She kept all of these from us, from the kids. She told me you'd stopped sending things years ago, that you'd lost interest in being part of our lives." I stared at the box, at the tangible evidence of Caroline's deception. All those times I'd thought my efforts were being ignored, they'd actually been intercepted. "There's something else," Michael said, reaching deeper into the box. He pulled out a small, weathered photo album I recognized immediately. "My memory book," I whispered, taking it from him with trembling hands. "I thought I'd lost it in the move 5 years ago." "She took it when you were downsizing," Michael said softly. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I had no idea how deliberate this all was." As I opened the album, tears filled my eyes. Here was the record of Michael's childhood, his first steps, first day of school, soccer games, science fairs, graduation, all the moments we'd shared, all the evidence of the love between us that Caroline had tried to erase. "The letter you gave her," Michael said, hesitantly. "It wasn't just the photo, was it?" I shook my head. "No, the photo was there, but so were these." I pointed to several pictures in the album. Michael and me at his college graduation, at Lisa's birth, at James's kindergarten ceremony. I wanted to remind her of who we were before she came into our lives. I wanted her to see what she was destroying. Michael nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. It wasn't just about her affair. It was about our history, the history she tried to erase. "Yes," I said simply. "It was about the truth." 3 months passed, bringing changes I could never have imagined that day at Thomas's baptism. Michael had filed for divorce, a process Caroline was fighting bitterly. The grandchildren spent every other weekend with me, filling my small apartment with laughter and teenage drama that I treasured. Even on weekends when they stayed with Caroline, they called or texted, refusing to let her isolate them from me again. My Wednesday group had become a fixed point in my week. These women, once strangers, were now friends who celebrated my small victories and offered support during difficult moments. Dorothy, the 80-year-old with the twinkling eyes, had become particularly dear to me. Her wisdom, delivered with unfailing humor, helped me navigate the complex emotions of watching my son's marriage dissolve, partly because of my actions. "You didn't break anything that wasn't already cracked beyond repair," she reminded me when guilt crept in. "All you did was stop pretending not to see the cracks." On a warm Sunday in July, I was preparing lunch for my weekly get-together with Michael when my phone rang. It was Lisa. "Grandma, is it okay if we bring someone to lunch today?" "Of course, sweetheart. Is it a friend?" There was a pause. "It's Thomas. Dad picked him up from Mom this morning for a few hours. I thought you might want to see him." My breath caught. Since the baptism, I hadn't seen my great-grandson. Caroline had maintained complete control over Thomas's schedule, refusing to let Michael bring him when he visited me. "I'd love that," I managed to say, my voice thick with emotion. I spent the next hour in a frenzy of preparation, pulling out the toy box I'd kept from when Lisa and James were small, checking and rechecking that I had everything needed for a 6-month-old. By the time the doorbell rang, I was a bundle of nerves. Michael stood there, holding a chubby baby boy with those unmistakable Gallagher eyes. Lisa and James flanked him, grinning at my obvious excitement. "Mom," Michael said softly, "I'd like you to properly meet your great-grandson, Thomas Robert Gallagher." My eyes filled with tears at the inclusion of Robert's name. "Something I hadn't known," Dad insisted, Lisa explained, seeing my reaction. "Even though Mom fought it, he said Thomas should carry the name of the man who sacrificed everything for our family." Michael placed Thomas in my arms. The baby looked up at me, curious but unafraid. I traced a gentle finger along his cheek, marveling at the softness of his skin, the perfect curve of his ear, the dimple that appeared when he gave me a gummy smile. "Hello, Thomas," I whispered. "I'm your great-grandma, Eleanor." The afternoon passed in a blur of joy. Thomas napped in the portable crib Michael had brought, woke to be fed and changed, and spent happy hours being passed between family members. I couldn't stop looking at him, at this newest branch of our family tree. "He likes you," James observed, as Thomas gripped my finger tightly. "He's fussy with most people he doesn't know well." "Babies can sense good hearts," Michael said, his eyes meeting mine across the room. Later, as Michael prepared to take Thomas back to Caroline, he hesitated at the door. "Mom, there's something I've been wanting to tell you." He shifted Thomas to his other arm. "I've been offered a teaching position at the university, engineering, just like I always wanted." "Oh, Michael, that's wonderful." I knew how much he'd given up when he took the corporate job Caroline's father had arranged. "It's less money," he admitted, "and Caroline is using that against me in the divorce. But for the first time in years, I'm excited about my work." I touched his arm gently. "Your father would be so proud of you." "I know I am." After they left, I sat in my quiet apartment, overwhelmed by the day's emotions. I picked up the phone and called Dorothy. "He brought the baby," I said when she answered. "My great-grandson. I finally got to hold him." "Well, isn't that something?" Dorothy replied, and I could hear the smile in her voice. Life has a way of coming full circle, doesn't it? That night, I dreamed of Robert. We were young again, walking through a sunlit park, and he was pushing a stroller. "You did good, Ellie," he said, using the nickname only he had ever called me. "You stood up for yourself. You reclaimed your place in the family." I woke with tears on my cheeks, but a lightness in my heart. The next few weeks brought more changes. Michael found an apartment close to mine, making it easier for the grandchildren to visit both of us. Caroline, realizing she was losing control, finally agreed to a more generous custody arrangement that included regular visits with Thomas for me. The first time Caroline brought Thomas to my apartment, her face was a mask of barely contained fury. She didn't come inside, simply handed the baby carrier to me at the door. 2 hours, she said flatly. Not a minute more. I nodded, determined not to give her any reason to cut off these precious visits. "Thank you for bringing him, Caroline." She looked at me then, really looked at me, for perhaps the first time in 15 years. "You think you've won, don't you? Destroyed my marriage, turned my children against me." I held her gaze steadily. This was never about winning or losing, Caroline. It was about truth. And the truth is, I never wanted to destroy anything. I just wanted to be treated with basic dignity and respect. She didn't respond, just turned and walked away. But something in her posture, a slight lowering of the rigid shoulders, made me wonder if perhaps, just perhaps, a seed of understanding had been planted. Over the next several months, a new rhythm established itself in our family. Caroline gradually softened, especially as she saw how the children thrived with both Michael and me in their lives. We would never be friends, Caroline and I, but we learned to coexist in a state of cool civility for the sake of the family we shared. Michael flourished in his teaching position, rediscovering the passion for engineering that had been buried under years of corporate conformity. Lisa applied to colleges, including my alma mater, asking for my input on her applications. James joined the school newspaper, discovering a talent for writing I hadn't known he possessed. And Thomas, dear, sweet Thomas, grew stronger and more curious by the day. By his first birthday, he was toddling around my apartment, pulling books from the lower shelves, banging on pots with wooden spoons, and falling asleep in my arms as I rocked him, singing the same lullabies I had once sung to Michael. The day of Thomas's birthday party arrived. Not a grand affair like the baptism had been, but a small, intimate gathering at Michael's new home. Caroline was there with her parents, keeping mainly to themselves in one corner of the living room. My Wednesday friends had helped me pick out the perfect gift, a handcrafted wooden train that Dorothy's son had made. As I watched Thomas unwrap presents, squealing with delight at each new treasure, I felt a deep sense of contentment wash over me. Martha sat beside me, having become a regular visitor in our extended family gatherings. "You look happy," she observed. "I am," I replied, surprised, to realize how completely true it was. "I never thought standing up for myself would lead to all this." "That's because you spent too many years believing you didn't deserve to be treated well," Martha said. "But better late than never, right?" Michael approached, carrying a small wrapped package. "Mom, this is for you." "For me? But it's Thomas's birthday." "Open it," he urged, sitting on my other side. Inside was a small silver frame. The photo it contained made my breath catch. It was Thomas and me, captured in a moment of shared laughter, during one of his visits. On the back was an inscription, "To Eleanor, the heart of our family, with love and gratitude." I looked up at my son, tears blurring my vision. "Thank you." Michael squeezed my hand. "No, Mom. Thank you. For never giving up on us, even when we gave you every reason to." Across the room, Thomas broke free from the circle of gifts and toddled unsteadily toward me, arms outstretched. I leaned forward to meet him, scooping him into an embrace as he reached me. In that moment, surrounded by the family I had nearly lost and the friends who had helped me find my strength, I finally understood that the letter I had handed Caroline that day wasn't just about exposing a secret or seeking revenge. It was about reclaiming my place in the world, not just as someone's mother or grandmother or great-grandmother, but as Eleanor Gallagher, a woman worthy of respect and love. As Thomas snuggled against me, his small hand patting my cheek, I silently thanked Caroline for that cruel public insult at the baptism. Without it, I might never have found the courage to break the silence that had imprisoned me for so long. Sometimes, I reflected, the greatest gift comes disguised as a wound that forces us finally to stand up and fight for the life we deserve.